organization that evolved out of al-Qaeda in Iraq, fought alongside other militant Sunni groups to rout the Iraqi army in Mosul and quickly continued on to Tikrit and the oil fields of Baji. At the same time, Iraqi Kurdish troops were able to seize the oil-rich city of Kikrut without a fight. Meanwhile, in neighboring Syria, ISIL continues to hold on to several provinces such as al-Raqqa, their current capital, as it confronts both the Assad regime and other anti-Assad groups contending for power. Since 2011, ISIL has been steadily expanding in Iraq and Syria and has become one of the most powerful groups in the Middle East. Today, I want to share with you a few things about the group that calls itself the Islamic State. We'll cover their history, their ideology and goals, organizational structure, and possible solutions against the threat posed by ISIL. So let's begin at the beginning. ISIL originated as an al-Qaeda splinter group. However, its roots can be traced back to the Jama'at al-Tawhid wa al-Jihad, meaning the organization of monotheism and jihad. In 2004, the group's leader, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, swore allegiance to al-Qaeda and renamed his group Al-Qaeda in the Land of Two Rivers, and pushed a vicious campaign of suicide bombings and attacks on both Iraqi and U.S. targets. His methods, however, were rejected by many Iraqis. They claimed that the group and its Jordanian leader were foreign interlopers in what was a national struggle. In June of 2006, U.S. forces subtly executed Zarqawi with the help of the GBU-12 and the GBU-38. After Zarqawi's death, Abu Omar al-Baghdadi took over and rebranded the group as the Islamic State in Iraq in an apparent attempt to nationalize its image. Baghdadi led the group and continued to attack sectarian U.S. targets until he was killed by U.S. and Iraq forces in 2010. Many claimed that Baghdadi was a foreigner and his video pronouncements were read by an Iraqi actor. After Baghdadi's death, he was replaced by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, whose real name was Ibrahim Awad Ibrahim al-Badri. It was from this point that the group began its international rise. In 2012, Baghdadi turned his attention to expanding his operations in Syria. He sent commanders across the border as civil war worsened and rebel factions began to fight amongst themselves. During that year, Abu Bakr declared a merger between ISIL and the al-Nusra Front, another al-Qaeda-inspired group led by a former lieutenant of Baghdadi's. Together they formed the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. On June 29, 2014, ISIL publicly uttered for the first time a word that meant little to the average person, but spoke volumes in the Islamic community. That word is caliph. That day, ISIL proclaimed their goal of establishing a worldwide caliphate, and that Abu Bakr, whose lineage they claimed went back to the Prophet Muhammad, is the only man who had the right to become the caliph of the new state. This message is reflected in frequent media reports by means of images of the world under an ISIS banner. As you can see in this map, the Islamic State is composed of various districts from both Syria and Iraq. In an attempt to maintain order, the Islamic State established a roughly organized governmental system. Jason Bellini, our correspondent over at the Wall Street Journal, explains the leadership and organization of the Islamic State.
The Islamic State hasn't publicly described the chain of command and how decisions are made and implemented, but a number of outside experts have been researching the organization. One of them, Hashim al-Hashimi, a Baghdad-based expert on Islamist groups, described in detail to the Wall Street Journal who he says reports to whom. His general outline of the leadership structure has been corroborated by other experts and U.S. intelligence sources. Here's how it looks.
Mr. Baghdadi has two top deputies. Abu Ali al-Anbari is responsible for Syria, and Abu Muslim al-Turkmani for Iraq. Both deputies were former generals under Saddam Hussein. These three top leaders are referred to collectively as al-Imara, the Emirate. key strategic and policy decisions for the Islamic State are made at the emirate level. Who falls under them? 12 governors of the Islamic State's 12 so-called provinces report to the 2 deputies. But 9 councils, which all report to Mr. Baghdadi's deputies, are responsible for creating policy and running the Islamic State. They function like departments or ministries. What do each of them handle? There's a leadership council, which reports to Mr. Baghdadi's deputies and is responsible for making laws and handling many important decisions. Those decisions are subject to approval by Mr. Baghdadi, but they, the members of the Leadership Council, have the right, in theory, to depose the Caliph. The Leadership Council gets advice from the Shura Council, which weighs in on religious and military matters. It's composed of 9 people who are versed in Islamic law. The Military Council calls the shots on fighting and defense of the Islamic State's acquired territory. Experts believe more than 25,000 Islamic State fighters are currently in Syria and Iraq. The Legal Council handles family disputes and religious infractions. It's in charge of recruitment of followers and also makes decisions on punishments, often in the form of executions. The Security Council handles the internal policing of the controlled territory, including checkpoints. Among its duties, carrying out executions. The Intelligence Council provides information to the leadership on the Islamic State's enemies. The Financial Council functions as the organization's treasury. It handles oil sales, weapons sales, and oversees cash estimated to be in the many millions of dollars. The Fighters Assistance Council supports the jihadists arriving from other countries. It finds them housing. It also helps smuggle foreign fighters in and out of Iraq and Syria. The Media Council issues the organization's official pronouncements and declarations. In addition to managing the Islamic State's social media and other communications, it regulates various other media outlets that serve the Islamic State. This is how the so-called Islamic State, as a governing body, is organized.
So what did the people think about what's happening with ISIL in the Middle East?
Hi, can I ask you a few questions real quick?
Sure.
All right, so I'm sure you've probably heard in the news about ISIL. Do you know what they are?
It stands for the Islamic State of Iran and Levant.
Okay, good. So since you seem to know a little bit about them, what do they do? Like what?
They're a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm. Based
out of Syria and Iran.
Okay. So how do you think we could probably go about solving this issue?
Well, I don't think it should be solely the United States' responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that first and foremost, we need to rely on the Muslim states themselves to kind of solve this conflict. And then after that, we might turn to the United Nations. But I don't think it's solely our responsibility.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. All right. Hi, Dr. Taylor.
Howdy.
I just wanted to ask you a few questions about ISIL.
Okay.
All right, so what do you think is a problem there and how can we solve it?
Would you like to go back 2,000 years or the last 15 years? Or the last 45 years? Can it be solved? Well, sure, of course it can be solved by force, but will it be solved permanently? The answer is no. Are we talking about overthrowing Assad? Are we talking about getting rid of ISIL? Are we talking about getting rid of both? How do you create a stable situation in the region? Do you allow the Kurds to have independence? Those are all open questions that nobody in political leadership, be it in the U.S., UK, France, elsewhere, is willing to answer.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
So how do you think the problem should be resolved? Give us a call now, 867-5309.